So I'm going to tell you a story about how an advocacy campaign learned to embrace data. And first of all, apologies. I was told that a speaker had lost their visa entry about 9 o'clock last night after a couple of drinks at the reception. So I had to improvise the presentation. I'll tell you a little bit about the Clean Clothes campaign. Um, so we work in the fashion industry. The fashion industry has a very long history of supply chain issues and underpaid workers. So what we are a network of about 230 organizations, and our aim is to amplify the voice of garment workers and fight for fairer work conditions. And we've sort of been around since dinosaurs roamed the earth. We started in 1990, and that means, yes, we do turn 35 this year. Yoo-hoo, jubileum. We are an avid user of open source because it aligns with our values, but it also allows us to work in a secure manner because we work with a lot of groups, partner organizations in challenging locations like Myanmar, like Cambodia, like Bangladesh, which have various degrees of authoritarian regimes. So we really have to take care of the data that we collect because it can land people into jail or even worse. So we've been campaigning for a very long time. This is a picture from 2004 when we were protesting at the Athens Olympics. And campaigning was always our focus. But even then, we already started gathering data, basically to back up our claims and to substantiate our demands. And our internal data, we have a very complex, very well-kept internal database, and the data goes back decades. But what really changed our approach to data was one very pivotal moment in our history, one that, yeah, really defines us up till this day, and that probably many people have heard about. And that was the Rana Plaza disaster in Bangladesh in April 24, 2013. This was the most horrible industrial incident in the garment sector ever. 1,134 people died, thousands were injured, and literally all the brands that we asked said like, no, we have no connections to this place. And so our people in Bangladesh literally spent 2 months going through the rubble and actually picking out the clothes from under that horrible place and finding labels. And then the brands were like, oh, now that you mention it, maybe we have been producing there. So we were like, never again. I mean, no amount of money can ever compensate loss of life, but finding those labels and connecting brands to that allowed us, after 2 years of hard campaigning, to secure 30 million US dollars for the survivors and their relatives. So that was really, that clicked into our mind like, we need data. We need data for remedy. We need data to make sure that this kind of thing never happens again. So it was not only the remedy, it also kicked off various major initiatives. First one was the Accord on Fire and Building Safety in Bangladesh. That basically was a program to improve the safety of the factories in Bangladesh. It was a legally binding accord, and about 200 brands signed, not quite voluntarily. We had to push hard to make them sign, but they did. It's now the international accord because it has expanded to Pakistan, and it will expand to other countries based on data that we are gathering to see where the situation for workers is most dangerous. It's not complete. Some brands still refuse to sign, so we're still doing campaigning to get brands to sign. We spoof some of the famous Swedish companies. So there's still a lot of work to be done. But we also worked then hard on increasing transparency in supply chains. So we started something called the Transparency Pledge, where we told brands like, these are the basic data that you need to supply about your supply chain. You need to tell the location, you need to tell how many workers are there, you need to tell us exactly who owns it. And then you can sign on to this thing called the Transparency Pledge. In the beginning, people told us like, you are crazy. Brands are never going to do this. But then the first brands started to do that, and then over 100 started doing it. So the data kept piling up. And it was usually in PDFs on the brand's website, so not very useful. So together with a lot of other organizations, we started something called the Open Supply Hub, which is an open source database aiming to map all production locations, not only in garments, but also in agribusiness, in conflict minerals, in basically anything that manufactures goods. And we were quite astonished at how well that has worked. We started out with nothing, and now we have over 3,000 organizations that contribute data. So that's mostly brands, but also trade organizations. There's 1.8 million facilities at the moment in there, and it's growing still exponentially. So open data really rocks because it allows us to track back if there is an incident in a factory. It allows us to, it used to take us 3 weeks to get some evidence of who was producing there. It's now down to an hour if people publish on the Open Supply Hub. And that's really crucial, this speed. So yeah, data, woo! But data alone is not enough. So we find that data works best when it's accompanied by policy. So we also worked hard on advocacy, and the Rana Plaza disaster was one of the major drivers for the EU's due diligence laws, which are currently under attack, unfortunately, because there has been a sharp right turn also in Europe. We had some quite good laws, the CSRD and the CSDDD, but currently there's something called the omnibus process that is trying to weaken them again. We've all been there before. You 2 steps forward, 1 step back. Eventually, we will go forward again. So why am I passionate about working in the garment industry? Short intermezzo. Well, the garment industry has an enormously long history of injustice. In a way, I think of it as the original sin of capitalism, where the triangle of oppression, taking enslaved people from Africa to the Americas to work on the cotton plantations. The cotton was then transported to England and then was processed by children in the dark satanic mills of northern England. And that has been the history of the garment industry, and not much has changed, only that the production has moved from the north of England to mostly Asia. And also, there have been, the Rana Plaza wasn't the first incident. There was the infamous triangle shirt fire in New York, in Manhattan in 1911, where over 150 people died because there was a fire. So these stories of sorrow must be told, but also the resistance. The women workers of the garment factories organized, and that was the beginning of the labor movement in the USA. So it shows the possibility for resistance, for organizing, but it also shows that these were not random incidents. They keep happening, and therefore, yeah, we need to hold these companies to account. So how do we do that? You can't always bring bad news. People also want to have a little bit of fun. So you have to somehow package it to be more acceptable. So yeah, we did some fun fashion facts. The global industry is big. It's about, as a country, it would be ranked about number 12 in the world for GDP. And at least 75 million people work there. So when we tried to tell those stories, we found out telling stories with data can be challenging. people are often overwhelmed by numbers. So what did we do? We created Fashion Checker. And Fashion Checker basically puts a very user-friendly, consumer-oriented face on data. So now I'm going to test the demo gods. So what is Fashion Checker? It's basically an app that helps consumers make informed choices about the brands that they buy from. Actually, I'm going to do the live demo at the end because maybe I'll run out of time. So it's better to complete the presentation. But we can do a little demo, and otherwise you can look it up on your own time. So we use the data to rate the brands on the transparency, their living wage, and the sustainability efforts. But if you click on one of the nicely presented graphs, you get taken to a backend that is ultra nerdy. It will show you the license, it will show you the raw data set, what other data sets you can combine it with. We use a platform called Wikirate, and it's awesome. So that's how we combine user-friendly information with still access for people like you who want the real data in the back. But when we presented this to our trade union members, they were like, yeah, but we're not that interested in the brand. We're interested in the factory that we are working in. So then we were like, ha, we've got you covered. We did another front end called the facility checker. And that is actually exactly the same data, but it focuses on a factory first approach. So trade unions can look up their own factory and see like, how is the pay compared to factories around us? How's the pay compared to factories in other countries? How is the gender pay gap? And that can empower them to start negotiating for better working conditions. Now, I must say we're not a sophisticated data outfit. Our thing is like, if it moves and it should be stuck, use duct tape. If it's stuck and it should move, spray it so that it moves. So we'll use whatever comes to hand. So for pipelines and tools, we're quite simple. We use localized mobile apps. We use CiviCRM and Drupal for surveys, and a lot of set and awk scripts to mangle everything into CSV. And at this place, a shout out to the Open Data Editor who helps to clean everything up. So what are our future plans for Fashion Checker? By the way, this is how the future looked in 1914. Remarkably accurate, I would say. The mobile phones look slightly different, but yeah, good approximation. So our future plans is to include some results that we can publish from our internal data, such as how effective are particular remedy mechanisms? How long do they take? Do they give out the results that the workers want? So we want to assess that on a systematic level and also see whether due diligence laws are fit for purpose. Yep. So bright future ahead. Will that mean we just have unicorns poop in our garden forever? Probably not. Also because we are under funding issues because we have a right-wing government. Half of our funding came from the US aid. So that's gone. So if anybody has a bunch of money, count us in. But there's a lot of supply chain challenges. You have to really be a detective to find out the data. This cat is better at it than I. So there's a lot of proprietary data. There's inconsistent formats. There's intentional obfuscation of the data. So challenges. But what do? You combine forces. So we cannot solve this alone, but thankfully we don't have to. We have a lot of other groups: Open Supply Hub, Wikirate, Wage Indicator Foundation, Fashion Revolution, Cornell Institute, Global Labor Institute, Catalyst Initiative. So there's a whole ecosystem of people working on this, and it's awesome to get to know them all. And there's also even transparency is now even going official. There's something called the United Nations Transparency Protocol, which is an open source protocol to combine all of this data. It's fully open source. It's being developed. It's awesome. If you're interested in open standards, go look it up. So everybody can do their part. If you can do your part, contact us. So that was me. I'm known as polyester on most social media, except for I'm definitely not known as polyester anymore on what used to be Twitter and is now X. I stopped using it for obvious reasons. You can contact me here. And that was it.
Thank you. That was really interesting. Given with the Open Supply Hub and looking at all that data, do you have a sense of, given the whole universe of supply chain data, I imagine you have some numbers about how many garments are produced, how much is getting covered in this open data and how much is still missing? Do you have senses of that?
Yeah, I think we are still missing at least half of the production. We are especially missing, of course, a lot of production that never gets into Europe or the US, that is produced in garment producing countries in Latin America. Latin America mainly produces for itself, in Brazil mostly, but also a lot of unbranded clothing is made to be sold in local markets, open air markets. So that is usually not covered, although some of it is done in the same factories where there's also garments being produced for brands, so they will be covered. But there is still a dark number, and there's also a lot of production happening in people's homes. So home-based workers are part of the supply chain, but we never try to get data on them because there's obvious privacy problems with that. Also because a lot of home-based workers are usually undocumented migrants, and you don't want to publish undocumented migrants' addresses, especially not in these times. So you can only aggregate results on that. But it will improve because at least Europe will introduce a digital product passport for garment and textiles. It will probably be delayed, but by 2030 it should be in place. And that will give a lot more incentives. Well, actually, then will be a requirement to map out your supply chain. So it's taken 15 years, but slowly we're getting somewhere. Yeah, sorry for taking too long.